year is 1985, and many of the biggest heavy metal bands on Earth are taking the year off. So what does this mean? It means the field is wide open for award season, and there's a lot of hungry young bands that have just arrived on the scene. Which one of them is going to take home the prize? Find out next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of The Metal Dude Abides. Tonight, we take a look at the year 1985 and determine the best heavy metal of the year. Now, this year comes with a bit of a caveat in that several of the biggest bands on planet Earth are taking a rest this year. For instance, the defending champions for Album of the Year, Metallica, they're in between albums. One of the bands that's brought home the prize in past years, Iron Maiden, well, they're doing a live album this year as they're out supporting Powerslave. Judas Priest, in between albums. The Scorpions, also doing a double live album in support of Love at First Sting. So, as I said in the intro, the field is wide open, and a lot of really good bands that might not have been able to win these awards see their opportunities. So tonight, let's see which of these young bands can take up this opportunity and jump to the front of the line. Speaking of young bands, let's get started right there. Best newcomer of the year. "1985 Newcomer of the Year" definitely has a theme. See if you can pick up on it. Our first nominee, Exodus, one of the Bay Area thrash bands. Many people feel that Exodus is left out of that big four category, that it should be a big five, because Exodus, one of the founding members of the thrash metal movement in the Bay Area. As a matter of fact, Kirk Hammett of Metallica fame does come from this band, Exodus. So they've been around a bit. One of the founding fathers, our first nominee, Exodus. Our second nominee isn't a thrash band, but they are also from the Bay Area. Faith No More. This is a band that has a big influence on metal, especially the new metal movement. Just got through doing a Deftones album review. Deftones, one of the bands majorly influenced by Faith No More. Our second nominee, Faith No More. Our third nominee, also coming from the Bay Area thrash movement, Megadeth. Dave Mustaine is back after being unceremoniously dumped from Metallica. He's got his own band now, and they are cooking on all cylinders. Our fourth nominee is the first one to not be from the Bay Area, but they are a thrash metal band. Overkill gets their start right here as well in 1985. The thrash metal movement is really picking up pace. And finally, our fifth and final nominee, Vicious Rumors. Again, not a thrash metal band, but a promising young heavy metal band from, guess where? San Francisco. You know, a lot's made about the LA movement and the new wave of British heavy metal, but right here, San Francisco comes out of nowhere to dominate this category. And the winner is Megadeth. You could make a legitimate argument for Exodus here, because their debut album, Bonded by Blood, is one of the best thrash metal albums of all time. However, you could even sense it right here, the talent of Dave Mustaine, the drive of Dave Mustaine. You kind of could tell this is going to be a band that's going to be around and going to make some waves. Congratulations to Megadeth, coming out of the gate swinging with a sensational debut. Now, the Grammys that year picked a pop artist by the name of Sade, who, much like most of the people that win this award, had a pretty good run in the 80s, had 2 or 3 albums that sold pretty well, and then kind of faded off into the sunset. My biggest complaint with this selection, however, is this. Sade is being nominated for Best Artist, New Artist of 1985, But she had a debut album all the way back in 1984 that sold well over 1 million copies. So now, for those of you who want to get into the technical weeds with me, the Grammys don't go by a calendar year. It's kind of that they go from like November to October, which is kind of bizarre. But this album of Sade's comes out in July of 1984, months into the window. So I don't even think she should be in this competition to begin with. So it's pretty easy to me. The best new artist of 1985 has to be Megadeth. Now let's go to Best Instrumental Performance for 1985. As we mentioned earlier in the video, a lot of the heavy hitters in this category are taking a year off. So we have a lot of new guitarists and underrated guitarists. Our first nominee comes from the band Accept and their song Metal Heart. I think this falls into underrated. Wolf Hoffman has been doing legendary guitar work for now over 4 decades. If you're unfamiliar with Accept, he has a real neoclassical style, puts a lot of classical music jams into his songs, and is one of the best players today. Our second nominee definitely falls into the underrated category. Akira Takasaki is a absolute maniac when it comes to guitar solos, guitar work. And I think the reason he's underrated is because Loudness comes from Japan. And for those of you who didn't follow Loudness's career, they come to the States for a few albums, and then the record labels get kind of weird and start dropping heavy metal bands. They go back to Japan for a large part of their career. But anybody that's ever had a chance to listen to this guy play knows he is one of the best of all time. Our third nominee falls more in that young category. Dave Mustaine has hit the ground running. He is back with a vengeance. He has a song called Last Rites Loved to Death. Now, one of the things that I will say about Dave Mustaine is he's a competitive fella. And he has to be a little bit simmering because Metallica has come out of the gates with 2 great albums. Now he's out to prove himself, and he puts out some of the most complex, heavy guitar work in his entire career right here on the debut album. You could pick any song, but I'm going with the opening track. Our fourth nominee also belongs in that kind of younger and underrated category. Sabotage with their song Necrophilia. The Oliva brothers founded Sabotage. Of course, Chris Oliva was the guitarist for Sabotage. He has some of the best guitar work in the early 80s you're ever going to see. He has a great tone. Unfortunately, as you know, Chris Oliva was taken from us way too young. But if you have never had the opportunity to listen to Sabotage in those early years with Chris on guitar, go out of your way to look these early albums up. And finally, our fifth and final nominee, you knew he had to be on here, Yngwie Malmsteen with Overture 1383. One of the great neoclassical type of guitarists in the world. These first 2 Yngwie Malmsteen albums are absolute shredding masterpieces. He is our fifth and final nominee. And the winner is Yngwie Malmsteen with Overture 1383. Everybody just get out of the way. Yngwie Malmsteen, like I said, these first 2 albums are absolutely masterpieces of guitar work. Nothing is going to compete with him for a bit. He is our winner for, I believe, now the 2nd year in a row. Congratulations to Yngwie Malmsteen. Now, interestingly enough, the Grammys that year also nominated Yngwie Malmsteen, although they did it in a weird way. They just nominated him for the whole Rising Force album. You know, it's funny, they have the nominees for all these songs, and they just go, Yngwie Malmsteen for the whole album. I don't know if that's a compliment or what. It's kind of interesting that it shows that the Grammys, you know, sometimes you think, did they just not know heavy metal existed? Like, were they completely like ostriches in the sand? But here, they do nominate a heavy metal guy. And again, Yngwie Malmsteen is legendary. But let's not, confuse the fact that mainstream people don't know who Yngwie Malmsteen is. He is pretty underground. So, sometimes you make excuses for the Grammys, but they had to have known heavy metal was existing. And to their due credit, give Yngwie Malmsteen a well-deserved nomination here. Of course, last year they also nominated Eddie Van Halen. So maybe the ice is breaking a little bit. They're starting to realize that the best guitarists on planet Earth belong in the heavy metal genre. Now that year they did not select Yngwie Malmsteen. They selected Jeff Beck. Now, I cannot ever complain about Jeff Beck winning anything, one of the greatest guitarists of all time. They also nominated Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I was thinking to myself, wow, 1985, you had Jeff Beck, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and Yngwie Malmsteen all putting out albums that the Grammys were listening to back then. Some really fantastic guitars. I will say this. Stevie Ray Vaughan, for those of you who have been listening to the channel, know this already, one of my all-time favorite guitarists as well. I was so lucky. Shortly after this, I got to see Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jeff Beck in concert together. It was kind of a dual headlining tour. One of the greatest nights of my life. Just fantastic stuff. Shortly before Stevie Ray Vaughan was taken from us way too soon. So I can't complain about Jeff Beck. I can't complain if they'd have given it to Stevie Ray Vaughan. And I'm shocked that they actually nominated Yngwie Malmsteen. Good on the Grammys. This is one that they actually got right. Let's see if they fare as well in the vocal category. All right, our nominees for Best Heavy Metal Vocal Performance of 1985 starts with Armored Saint and their song Aftermath. John Bush is a singer who is just getting started. He has such a powerful and I would say kind of gritty voice. One of my all-time favorite singers. This song comes off the album Delirious Nomad. Not a real popular album in the Armored Saint catalog. I suggest you go back and give it another listen because John Bush's voice absolutely is at peak performance. He annihilates so many songs on this album. With that fantastic voice of his. Our first nominee, Armored Saint. Our second nominee is a more familiar figure, if you will. Dio, with his song King of Rock and Roll. I'm not a big fan of the Sacred Heart album, but it's Dio, my favorite vocalist of all time. So whenever he puts out music, he's almost a lock to get a nominee. And one of the songs that I do like off Sacred Heart is the opener, which is kind of a live track called The King of Rock and Roll. Kind of an interesting way. The rest of the album is all studio. This one's live. And man, if you never had the chance to catch Dio live, you at least need to hear it on this track here. It is outstanding. Our third nominee is the band Dokken and their song In My Dreams. While Dio is a legendary performer, Don Dokken is just starting his career, and he is putting together album after album of outstanding vocal performances. He is kind of a little bit more like Klaus Meine in that most of the songs he does and gets a lot of credit for tend to be more on the ballad side of things, and this is no exception. Don Dokken, a rising star in the heavy metal vocal world. Now, our fourth nominee is the band Grim Reaper and their song Fear No Evil. Now, a quick note on Grim Reaper here. They came out with their debut album, See You in Hell, and they put together a little video that went kind of big on MTV, and it seemed to be like a big hit for them. And they were never able to, for whatever reason, have that big hit afterwards. So some of their subsequent albums are kind of ignored, but in my humble opinion, their subsequent albums are even better than their debut by a long shot. So if you heard their first album and then kind of lost track of them, go back. This album, Fear No Evil, is absolutely fantastic, and Steve Grimmett's voice is like off the charts on this entire album. And finally, our fifth nominee, the other Oliva brother, John Oliva, as he is the lead singer for Sabotage, and he puts on another vocal tour de force. Power of the Night is a fantastic song. The song that I actually got into Sabotage on right here. And the winner is Grim Reaper, Fear No Evil. This may seem like a bit of an upset, but if you never have heard Steve Grimmett's vocals, you would know that he is one of the most talented singers. And again, in this case, falls into one of the young singers of up-and-coming singers, but also underrated. Again, I'm not sure why Grim Reaper never could recreate the magic from their first album, commercially wise, but Steve Grimmett's voice, it is just legendary. Congratulations to Grim Reaper. Now, the Grammys that year gave the best vocal performance to Don Henley for The Boys of Summer. I make this point almost every episode, but I mean, Don Henley's got a fine voice, but I don't think that there's anything spectacular about his voice. Whereas you look at some of the singers in heavy metal and the things that they're doing, sorry everybody, Grim Reaper's got to win best vocalist across the board, because Don Henley, with his Deadhead sticker on the Cadillac, it's fine, but it's nothing to write home about. One more thing. I don't always put a female award out, because sometimes I just don't feel like there's that performance that I have to talk about. But I will also point out that year the Grammys gave the best vocal performance for a female to Tina Turner. As I said a couple of episodes ago, it seems like the Grammys get into these ruts, and all of a sudden it's Tina Turner's turn. She's winning all sorts of awards. But Tina Turner's not the story here. Heart returns. Ann Wilson returns. Ladies and gentlemen, this is kind of like I talked about Dio's Sacred Heart not being like my favorite album. Heart comes back a little bit more commercial than their hard rocking days of the 70s. But that does not diminish Ann Wilson's voice. Whenever Ann Wilson is producing music, she should just automatically win it. They should just rename the award. Ann Wilson is the greatest singer ever. But also that year, just interestingly enough, many people would also say she has fair competition from Grace Slick. They come back. Again, Starship, not as good as the old Jefferson Airplane by a long shot, but her voice is outstanding. And Annie Lennox and the Eurythmics are still there. And Pat Benatar puts out a single. The clear choice is Ann Wilson, but there are several choices that the Grammys could have made here that are better than Tina Turner. Just saying. All right, enough of that. Let's go on to the best songs of the year in both hard rock and heavy metal. All right, let's start with the best hard rock songs first. Our first nominee comes from Aerosmith. Let the Music Do the Talking. This is Aerosmith's big comeback. For those of you who may or may not know, they had split up. Joe Perry had started his own band called the Joe Perry Project, and Aerosmith did one album, Rock in a Hard Place, without Joe Perry. This was them reuniting. And oddly enough, the opening track was actually a song that was produced and recorded by the Joe Perry Project, but Aerosmith liked it so much they thought that's how we want to reintroduce ourselves to the fan, and it is amazing. Our first nominee, Aerosmith, Let the Music Do the Talking. Our second nominee is Dokken with one of my favorite songs of theirs, It's Not Love. Right now, Dokken has put out a couple of albums, Tooth and Nail and now Under Lock and Key, that I think are the 1A and 1B in the Dokken collection. This is Dokken at their absolute best. Maybe right now Dokken might be the best hard rock band on the planet. Our third nominee is Faith No More with We Care a Lot. Faith No More putting out their debut album. They get off with a real banger right off the bat. This song has been in so many soundtracks. It finds its way all the time, and it's so darn catchy. Our fourth nominee, Motley Crue, with their song Home Sweet Home. Once again, you know my feelings about the direction Motley Crue's going, a much more commercial direction from Shout at the Devil. This is a full-blown hair ballad, but it is very good. And finally, our fifth nominee, another newcomer to the scene, The Cult, with their song She Sells Sanctuary. The Cult kind of lasts for 2 or 3 albums before they kind of fall apart a little bit, but boy, are they about to go on a run. One of the best bands in the mid to late 80s you're ever going to hear. And the winner is Motley Crue, Home Sweet Home. Again, not a big fan of the cheetah skin pink spandex that Vince Neil's all of a sudden wearing. They definitely have taken their music in a much more commercial direction, but this is one of the best ballads in the history of heavy metal ballads. You know, the hair metal movement kind of gets into this groove of they put out a banger and then they put out a ballad, and it just becomes kind of the 1-2 step. This is one of those songs that kind of started that trend. It is absolutely fantastic, along with a video that is, probably one of the most famous scenes in the history of hard rock videos, where Nikki Sixx motions to some gal in the crowd, and somebody from behind her decides to help Nikki out and lift up her shirt. One of those infamous moments in heavy metal video history. Congratulations to Motley Crue. Let's move on to Best Heavy Metal Song of 1985. Okay, let's talk about the top 5 heavy metal songs of 1985. Our first nominee, Anthrax, with their song Armed and Dangerous. One of the things I've noticed about the thrash metal movement is in a lot of cases, the debut album for the band was meh, and then their second album is this huge leap forward, and this is the case with Anthrax. I didn't really care for their very first album, but they come back with this bad boy. Joey Belladonna's on board at this point, and they just knock it out of the park. And in particular, one of my favorite Anthrax songs of all time is right here, Armed and Dangerous. There used to be a radio program on back in the day called Metal Shop. That's when I first heard this song in Anthrax, and have been a fan ever since. Our second nominee is the exception to the rule, Exodus, with their song Strike of the Beast. I just got through saying that when it comes to thrash metal, most bands have kind of an auspicious debut and then really hit their stride with their second album. Exodus is that one exception that comes to mind, in that I believe their very best album is the first album, Bonded by Blood. This is the closer on that album, I believe, and it is an absolute heavy juggernaut of a song. Our third nominee comes from the band Loudness, Rock and Roll Crazy Nights. Okay, there might be a couple of songs on here that might be a little bit better than this one, but this is the song that really broke Loudness big. This is such an infectious anthem of a song. You cannot stop shaking your fist and banging your head to this one. It is one of the catchiest metal songs of all time. Our fourth nominee, Sabotage, Power of the Night. This is one of my favorite albums. This is one of my favorite bands. And interestingly enough, if you caught Sabotage later in their careers, they were kind of a symphonic progressive band at that point. But here early on, I would say they are much more, maybe even doomy, definitely more straightforward heavy metal, a complete, maybe even power metal at this point. So if you've never heard the early stages of Sabotage, start right here. It's a good one. And finally, our fifth and final nominee, Wild Child by Wasp. Similar to what I said about Dokken, Wasp has just hit the ground running. They've put together back-to-back albums that are fantastic. I really love Chris Holmes' guitar at this stage. Such great tone, such great production on their albums. Really love this album, really love this song. It is our 5th nominee. And the winner is I'm a Wild Child, Come and Love Me. Wasp. Have always thought that the Wasp was an underrated band. I think the problem with Wasp is they have such an over-the-top visual presentation that I think it turns some people off. But it's kind of funny. They're very heavy, but they've got such great melodies in their songs. Really catchy. They can do ballads. They can do heavier stuff. I mentioned Chris Holmes' guitar is so good on this entire album. Wild Child. In a runaway on this one. Love that song to death. Now, the Grammys that year, they picked We Are the World. We Are the Children. Now, for those of you who weren't around in the 80s, let me just say we loved our aid concerts. We were doing aid for Farm Aid. We were doing aid for, I think this one was for starving kids in Africa. We did aid for AIDS, I think. We were doing aids all over the place. And the Grammys always loves a good song done for charity. So the premise of this is like, 20 or 30 of the biggest musicians on planet Earth get on a stage and they sing, "We are the world, we are the children," and everybody lights their lighters and waves their hands in the air. Now, the thing about it is, let's be honest, I'm glad we were doing things for charity back in the day, raising lots of money, but is this a good song? Not even close. Now, there is a tie-in to heavy metal in that nobody from the heavy metal community was invited in on this little boondoggle. So the boys from Dio got together, and in a couple of years, they're going to put out a heavy metal version of this called Stars. So we'll probably talk about that one in the day. But at the end of the day, raised a lot of money. But it's just one of those compilation songs where a bunch of people are singing a chorus together. Nothing to write home about. So, Song of the Year, we're going to stick with who we talked about. Wild Child by Wasp. Let's get to the best hard rock and heavy metal albums of the year. All right, let's talk about the 5 nominees for Best Hard Rock Album of the Year. It starts with the band Dokken and their album Under Lock and Key. As I mentioned earlier, Dokken has, in my humble opinion, 2 albums that stand out above the rest in their catalog, Tooth and Nail, and this boy right here, Under Lock and Key, really Dokken at the height of their powers. Our second nominee is a bit of a underrated band. Never really quite made it, not sure why. King Cobra with their album Ready to Strike. For those of you who may or may not know, this was a band that had Vinny Appice's brother, Carmine Appice, in it for a bit. They have some really good hard rockin' songs. Never quite made it, not sure why, but this album, from start to finish, is very, very good. And our third nominee is in a similar boat, Malice, with their album In the Beginning. I don't know why Malice didn't make it. I don't know why King Cobra didn't make it. These are 2 of the most underrated hard rock albums of the mid-'80s. Go check them out. Now, our fourth nominee is not an underrated band, Rat, with Invasion of Your Privacy. This is their second album, and once again, Rat, probably the biggest commercial success of any of these bands. They were just selling albums left and right. I've said this about Rat. Not only do they put out good music, they were always on top of their game when it came to videos and that visual presentation. Really good band here. And finally, The Cult puts out their album Love. Again, The Cult is going to go through about a 2 or 3 album stretch where they're going to absolutely kill it. It starts right here on this album. And the winner is Dokken, Under Lock and Key. I'm always talking about tough competitions and how it could have gone either way and this, that, the other. This is one of those rare moments where this was a runaway. I think this is by far the best hard rock album of the year. I think right now Dokken is the best hard rock band on the planet. This was an absolute wipeout. Dokken all the way. Now let's talk about the top 5 heavy metal albums of the year. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for. The best heavy metal albums of 1985. The nominees are Anthrax, Spreading the Disease. What a jump from Anthrax. First album, not very good at all. Second album is an absolute dynamo. Again, Joey Belladonna comes on the scene and really takes them to the next level. Our second nominee, Loudness, Thunder in the East. The big anthem that we talked about earlier, Rock and Roll Crazy Nights, that's the big attraction on this album. But it has so many good songs, throughout the entire thing. If you've only heard the big hit off there, do yourself a favor. Go listen to the entire album. It is absolute killer. Our third nominee, Sabotage, Power of the Night. What can I say? Again, one of my favorite albums of all time. Love the early work of Sabotage. Our fourth nominee, Wasp, with The Last Command. I will say once again that the production on those early Wasp albums, if for no other reason, that could be why they're in the list, because they sound so much better than a lot of their contemporary albums. Kudos to Wasp for putting out such phenomenally well-made music. And finally, Yngwie Malmsteen with Marching Out. You cannot touch the very first 2 albums by Yngwie Malmsteen. They are absolute tour de force of guitar work and will stand in the Hall of Fame of shredding long after we've all gone. And the winner is... For those people who know me well, this is probably going to be a little bit of an upset, because I'm going with Loudness, Thunder in the East. I'm well known by my friends for having a obsession with Sabotage, but in this case, I do believe Loudness actually produces the best album of the year. I don't think they quite get enough credit because I think too many people were focused or fixated on the one big hit anthem, Rock and Roll Crazy Nights, but they had other great songs on this album. I'll just mention a few, like Hell. Very catchy, very heavy. We're talking about Heavy Chains, Akira, with his guitar work on that one in particular, out of this world. And really, the vocals, the heaviness, the catchiness, the guitar work. Loudness has it all on this album and are a well-deserved winner. Now, the Grammys that year picked Phil Collins, No Jacket Required. And while I prefer the last Phil Collins solo album more than this one, I will say that Phil Collins was one of the biggest acts on planet Earth, and I'm not going to dicker with that selection too much. He was at the top of his game, one of the greatest artists and drummers of all time. Kind of funny, I always thought Phil Collins was better after he left Genesis. And I really felt that Peter Gabriel was better after he left Genesis. Which is kind of interesting. Like, Genesis, what were you doing? You had Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel, and you kind of held them down a little bit. I don't know about Mike Rutherford and the boys. But anyway, I digress. The other thing I want to mention here is the Grammys have started a new category called Best Rock Performance. And this is kind of a harbinger of what the heavy metal awards are going to look like in a couple of years, where we're going to see Best Heavy Metal Performance. It's not an album, it's not a song, it's a performance. Although generally speaking, when you look through the nominees, it's usually a song. And in this case, Best Rock Performance went to Dire Straits for their song, Money for Nothing. I'm going to get a little mellow on you here, but I love Dire Straits. I love Mark Knopfler's guitar work. And if I had to choose an album of the year, as stunning as this may sound, I would not have picked No Jacket Required. I would go with Brothers in Arms. I think it's Dire Straits' absolute best album, and I think it is much more worthy to win across the board Album of the Year. Mark Knopfler, again, what a year for guitarists. We just got through talking about Jeff Beck. We just got through talking about Yngwie Malmsteen. We just got through talking about Stevie Ray Vaughan. Mark Knopfler's right up there as well. What a year for guitars. 1985, Album of the Year. We're going to go with Brothers in Arms. And that's our episode. We are going through the entire history of heavy metal from the late 60s all the way to modern day. Of course, just look at the calendar. The next year we're going to be looking at pretty shortly is 1986. So if you want to hear who are the best artists of 1986, the best way to do it is to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, get notified when we put out new content. We are probably going to put a couple of albums out between the years as I do all that research. So you want to be alerted. You don't want to forget about this. And then in a couple of weeks, you're not going to remember that this episode is happening. So the best way is to just be alerted, and you'll get notified because we do this every Tuesday night, and we'd love to have you at the premieres. In the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.